Hey friends, welcome to another episode of From Busy to Rich podcast. This podcast exists to inspire advisors like you to increase your profitability and your quality of life, but not just for you, also for those that you serve. And today is a special day for us because we've got a guest. So Wes, I want to first by saying welcome to you as always. Glad you're here.
Hey, Andy.
And I'd love for you to talk to us about our guest and introduce.
No, I'm super excited, man. We Mike and I, Mike Scoville is our guest today. He and I have been friends for somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 decades. And he's been a great friend to me and to my family, as well as really a great personal mentor of mine. He's got really good thinking, really good ideas. Doesn't quite think like most people, which I deeply appreciate, and really just who he is. He's accomplished a lot of things, and I want him to talk to you about that. But there's that great quote: "What you become as a result of the chase is the most important thing." And what if you get to the opportunity to know Mike, what he's become is just he continues to become a more beautiful person in every aspect of what a man is. And so I'm grateful to Mike for being on the show. And in a second, Mike, I'm going to ask you to just talk a little bit about what things are like for you right now, so people get a background, and then what they were like at your very posh, plush beginnings that you had, which they'll all get to hear about. And as I was thinking about a theme for this season of our podcast, I knew I wanted to have Mike on because there's a great book, Jamie Kern Lima. She actually sold her cosmetics company for $1.2 billion in 2016 to L'Oreal. She wrote a book called Worthy, but there's a chapter in that book that I thought, this is the chapter that we're going to do a whole series around. And the chapter's called "You're Not Crazy, You're Just First." And I'll tell you, as I've got to observe Mike, and not just him individually, but the impact he makes on the people around him, whether those are people that have been a part of the organizations that he's led, or friends that are completely disconnected from that, or family members, or my family. He has a way of helping people see things in themselves that they don't. They really would struggle. They think, well, that's crazy, but it's only crazy because it's a new idea to them. It's first for them. Great quote. Arthur, and I'm gonna try and say the last name correctly. He was a German philosopher, Schopenhauer. So my German students out there can correct me on that. But he said this. He said that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as being self-evident. And I will tell you, that's just a great thing that when I think about Mike, I think about these truths that he carries around. In fact, Mike's written a great book called The 52 Truths, which we're going to give away 10 of those to the first group of people that Andy's going to give some criteria for by the time we get to the end of the podcast. But I'm super excited about his book. You need to get it. You need to read it. We're going to talk about some of those truths today, in addition to a lot of other stuff. But Mike, man, thanks so much for being a part of the show today. And if you would, man, I just love it if you talk a little bit about what's a day, a year, a week in the life of Mike today, and what was it like when you first got going?
Well, I'm so grateful to be with you guys. Thanks, Wes and Andy, for having me. I am a listener of your podcast, and you've just had some great people on. So what an honor to kind of be with you and get to partake in this experience. You bring up lots that you just opened up with. My goodness gracious, and there's a lot of things that are spinning through my head, just wanting to go completely off course. I'm not. Okay, but I love the mentality, right, of being first in something, right? Like taking a new direction, a new path, new journey. That's super exciting and worthy of a conversation in itself. But I'm going through that right now. It's interesting because you bring that up. Company, 100 and almost 80-year-old company, has created something, and there was 116 managing partners, I think, currently in the New York Life, that right around that number. I was one of them, and ultimately just transformed into a new position. I'm a senior managing partner. Now the title is not really relevant, but it's ultimately it could be. I have more gray hair than I had certainly when I started, but literally one of these new positions that allow me to work with multiple offices and more in mentorship that that is a new kind of trend that New York Life's on this path with. So how it goes, the future of this program, right, has a lot to do with how it will go with me and those initial connections. And so a lot of responsibility in that, but a lot of excitement, right? It's that opportunity to take something that's so structurally sound and has been done a certain way for so long, and to be able to say, how do we make this better? And I do believe the company's up to something here, and it will be better. So grateful. As I said, I mean, shoot, you mentioned from beginnings, right?
Yeah.
The office I get to be a part of right now. We're kind of changing the trajectory of this office. It's going through a transformation, but right now there's about 500 advisors that I get to work with on a daily basis. And as we are shifting, I'm going to reduce some of those here locally and get to work with external offices around the state of Texas as well as Oklahoma. But a far cry from the beginning for most people, right? I was 22 years old when I started at New York Life. As an advisor, love that role. Thought I'd be in that forever. And ultimately,
Mike, but you got to talk about why they knew you would be a great advisor. It was the preparatory process that you went through your career before this career.
I did. Yeah. So you want me to go that far back, right? So
yeah.
If you so I let me tell you, here's what's really interesting. I would say a typical right. My parents did not have a lot of money. Okay. I was in this position, right, where I kind of helped out. In fact, I was cleaning HUD homes. And if that's what you're talking about, preparatory, that definitely was as preparatory as anything. Cleaning HUD homes. These are homes that are abandoned by people, normally not on their will, right? They are usually kicked out of them, and they are leaving these homes in the most vile, disgusting way. Like angry leaving, and I'll show you for taking my space.
No toilets were flushed.
And I had to clean those, right? So that was my weekends as a 12, 13, and 14-year-old. I hated weekends. I was 100%. Please get me back to school, because that was so much more pleasurable. And it's so funny today, right? I say this a lot. I love every day of the week. I think my favorite day of the week, though, are Mondays and Fridays for very interesting reasons. I love coming up elevators and talking to people and say, man, are you excited about today? And they look at you like a complete fool on a Monday, right? It's Monday. We got 5 more days of getting to do what we get to do. Like, how blessed are we? Now, I love Fridays too, because my family's just absolutely crazy and fun. And I have just as much fun there. They're just both really great places to be. And I cherish them for different reasons, and they give me different feelings and experiences, right? But going back to that whole, upbringing of just not having a lot of money, and my parents couldn't afford to do things for us that most people do. I was certainly not going without food, but everything I had to do on my own. And obviously there were times when my mom would come to me, right, and borrow money. Because I did get paid a little bit to clean HUD homes, and I swear I never charged interest. I promise I didn't, right? But literally, that was kind of the house, right? She would give it back to me, but no college fund there, of course not. No car funding, no ability, and they would have loved to have done it. They would have loved to have helped, just didn't have the capacity. And so a lot of things I had to learn pretty quickly. Like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it on your own. And I think most of us, again, listening to this, probably had a very similar kind of experience, maybe some more extreme, some less. But I think it's the opportunity that those present, right? I wouldn't change a thing about it. My parents were amazing, and I would never wanted any different type of upbringing. I joined New York Life again at 22, having come from sales and in car stereos that I actually was doing quite well in. And that
Radio Shack, baby. Radio
Shack too. Yeah, Radio Shack. Well, heck, if we want to go through a ton of them, my best job ever, and I was amazing. I was a yogurt man. I managed a yogurt shop at 18 years old. I was a manager, and I could juggle yogurt utilities, like utensils and all the things that made yogurt. Like, I was a show stopper in that yogurt shop. So that was fun. But it got me all these different things, right? Managing at 18, having some sales experience at 19, 20, 22, went to New York Life, and have been with New York Life over 30 years, in an agent role for 2, and the rest of it in management and leadership role. So
fantastic.
I want to ask you about, as you developed and you started to have some success, and they started to ask you to be an influence on other advisors. Mm-hmm. Did you have to talk yourself into, I have something to share with them? I mean, obviously you're a hard worker, but for those who are listening that say, I have some measure of success, but I'm not sure about how much impact I'm having on other advisors. Maybe I want to grow my company and bring in new advisors, but they're struggling with, am I really the leadership type, or maybe I'm too young? When did they tap you for, hey, we need you to kind of spread what you're doing? And then did you embrace that right away, or was there some hesitancy personally?
So, it's interesting. I loved the advisor role. And again, I think I was only an advisor for 2 years. So many would say, wow, that was not very long to learn much. I would say I had a interesting or unique experience in that I started in March of 1994. I had 100 clients in my first 9 months. And in my second year, which was 12 full months, I added 238 clients. So I was a very active advisor, going through a lot of experiences, right? In my first, 20 months with New York Life, I had about 330 clients. One of the things that struck me was that we're all built differently, right? I absolutely loved working with the clients, but I found that working with other advisors and sharing, I guess, and cultivating those types of relationships were probably a little bit more innate to me. Again, we're all built so differently. It's so wonderful to be in an industry with so many different avenues. And so I became a partner at 24 years old, right? That's where I'm starting to work and develop. Now, of course, I get tapped to do that. You're helping advise and work with newer advisors. So they don't give a lot of pushback and they don't know what's right or wrong. So thankfully, right, I got to learn my way doing what I had done as an advisor and then helping new people who didn't really know enough to argue with me, and they just went with it, right? And ultimately had great success doing that. So that experience as a partner was huge, but it moved me into a very quick opportunity to become a managing partner as I was just turning 28 years old. So what's funny about that experience is I was the youngest MP by easily in the company, and that, like the second youngest that was ever put into that role. The interesting part about that was the advisors that I got to work with now in my first office. The office I took over had an average tenure of 23 years. So the advisors that I was working with now had an average time with New York Life about my age, right? And so that's a completely different relationship and a whole different level of having to earn respect or trust. And it's completely up my game, right? Scary and yet exhilarating at the same time.
Mike, I think a lot about that as it relates to even the advisor journey, because for those listening to the podcast, we're largely made up of advisors of varying different tenures, and much like that, when you're new, you're working. Typically, your market is not like the super successful business owner entrepreneur. You're working with people at night at the kitchen table, trying to figure out where they're going to come up with the $50 a month to pay for the term insurance that you discovered they needed. And quite often where they're going to come up with it again the next month because it would lapse for insufficient funds. And that's a different game you're playing than when you've been in country a while. And now you're working with people that frankly are doing really well without you. They've been successful. They've made it in a lot of ways, and they checked a lot of boxes that you would say that's a pretty good life. And so it's a different kind of dance and relationship that exists there to help them understand, hey, you got a great life and you've done things one way for a long time. But one of the things I've noticed about you and seen you do time and time again with people in and out, inside the organization, but also outside, is your ability to kind of raise their level of potential. And one of the things you wrote about in your book, one of my favorite chapters, there's a couple of chapters I want to highlight. I want everybody to get the book with the 52 Truths, is you wrote in chapter 8 about don't limit your potential. And I just want to read one quote from this book here. It says, if you use the past as a guide, your future will always be minimized. Most people believe that the future equals, or at least resembles, the past plus or minus an increment. Remove the past from your future, and there's no limit to the possibilities. I want you to talk about that a little bit, because you go deep here. You've helped me here in a lot of ways, and I've just seen you do that organizationally, corporately, and individually.
Mike, I do want to ask a question, though. That sounds like a really nicer, more motivational way to give the warning. Past performance is not right. When you think about stocks, it's like, do not base this upon the past. So
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's rooted in that truth of past performance is not an indicator or a promise of. So I love the heart behind that. It's true in investments, but I think it's true with a capital T. So can you tell advisors who maybe, as Wes was saying, they measure their future by their past, how they can break out of that?
Yeah. Yeah. So that is it's not on purpose, right? It's a subconscious issue of just, and again, it stems literally because we typically continue to do the same things we've always done. So to expect something different, right, would be foolish. So I love the commentary. And as a manager, I could plan out a year's productivity. And again, in a very sad way, this is the sad part. And I could predict the production based on what they were always doing. That's a sad commentary, right? The opportunity is, where are the possibilities and how do we really grow this? Because another thing that's predictable is that the longer you do something, two things happen. You get a very a set defined expectation that those activities will create, right? The more I do something, I start to see the results that they do. Therefore, I should know that if I do this activity going forward, it'll reproduce about the same thing. Now, the sad part of that is that there's no more boring way to go through a career journey than in a predictable manner, right? And sadly, because it's boring, because it loses energy, it oftentimes even starts to decline, right?
Sure,
that predictable, measurable thing that we do all the time, we start putting a box around it, these expectations of what it will do, and that gets me bored, and therefore I do it more poorly, less energetically, and the results decline. So this whole opportunity, and again, whether I've been taking an office for me or as an advisor looks upon their year and says, what do I want to embark on? What do I want to create? That space of working towards something that's possible just raises a level and creates a need for ingenuity, creativity, disciplines, whatever it might be that can take them on the next path. Here's what I would just say to everybody. And there's so many different people on this podcast with different backgrounds and different current experiences. You know, one of our top advisors out of another office, right? I was talking to the managing partner of that office, and we have a extremely successful advisor we're talking about, and he was bringing up a conversation that they had about 5 years earlier. And this person was already successful, not at the top of the game, but by all standards, really doing well. And when he went to meet with this great advisor, doing fine, it was shocking for him to receive the question from this advisor, which was, is this all it is?
Wow.
Is this it? Again, not the expectation of their connection. And literally, there might be many on this call, right, that are like, God, is this it? Right? Again, it could be in your first year asking that question. You could be in your 30th year asking that question. But the key here is it can never come up, because literally, if we're always manufacturing something unique or new, you know that the answer to that question would be no. Like, so it'd be a question you wouldn't ask. And I think that we have to get ahead of that. Well, I have to be in a place where I don't want to put myself in a position to even ask that question. What do I have to do today in order for me to actually stay away from that as a possibility? Okay, so you said something, and can I say something about that chapter, or can I?
Yeah. No,
okay.
dig in.
All right. Because there's three things that as you are setting about your year, right? We're in July right now for New York Life. That happens to be a new beginning, right? For those that are not with the company or with whatever company you're at, you're halfway through your year potentially. But the whole thing is about, where am I going, and what are the things I am setting in place to make something interesting. Most people have, I call them the 3 Ps. Our futures are one of these. Okay. There are 2 that are destructive, that are ultimately not to your advantage. And I think most commonly used. And then there is one that's actually the only way to do it. Let me talk about the 2 first real quickly. Right. And we're all used to this, the pipe dream, future, right? Pipe dream. It's that future that It sounds exciting. It's really big, and it really motivational, right? But ultimately, when you know it's a pipe dream, is that you have set sights that are far greater than where you're at currently and are doing nothing different.
Mm-hmm.
Love.
That's where you get pipe dream. You just know it, right? I'm going to do this next year. I'm going to triple my production. I'm going to double my production, whatever it might be. And 2 weeks later, you find that you're doing exact activities that you were doing just 6 weeks ago. Nothing has changed. That's become a pipe dream. Super destructive, because what it starts to do is it starts to create this belief that you're not capable of something interesting or bigger, right? I shift back to the other P, which is possible, which is probable. The probable P, right? What are you going to do this year? Well, you know what? I did 80,000 last year. So what I'm going to do this year is probably around 80 grand. And you know what? Yeah. You're probably right. You're probably right.
So exciting.
Exciting. Yeah. And again, what's interesting about that space, right? It's certainly safe, certainly probably don't fail very often in that space, but you ultimately never create energy either. And again, this is a very, very difficult thing to continue to do over and over and over again with no energy, no excitement, no gamification. And so many people are doing that, right? Which means that they're kind of in survival mode. I look at these people who are surviving this career. And again, there are periods maybe where survival is necessary, but when that becomes your pattern and behavior for the entire experience, you will do great things. You will impact lives like nobody's business. It is awesome what we get to do. You just won't have experienced what you could have. And that's where the third P is, right? Possible. What is possible? And honestly, it's interesting because possible numbers can be pipe dream numbers. It just becomes possible when you actually change the activities and the requirements, the disciplines, as we talked about earlier. You remove things that are unnecessary. You add things that are. You grow personally. You put it out there. You let people know about it. You put your ego on the line. You put your reputation on the line. I will get this done.
Yeah.
And again, I would tell you, I'll throw you in there, Wes. I loved talking to you 6 months ago when you were in this race of saying, I want to be the number one advisor for New York Life. It's an incredible goal, right? In talking to you, you were not even close to that number. The number you stated to your team was ridiculous, and you'd never done it in the past, right? Never. Yeah. And the team asked you, remember, right? Well, how are you going to do that? How are we going to get to that number? And I'm not going to say your number because it might be private. I don't know, but it's stupid. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna get there. And again, not knowing, I have no issue with that. It's all of the journey about creating that once you've made that declaration, right? I've made a statement out there in the future that is bold and exciting, and I am going to create the proper processes in order to make that happen. I just can't tell you what they are today.
Mike, is it true, though, that even in the state of whatever the number is, and it's not about that number, it's about whatever the thing is that if you're listening to this, you have something that you want to achieve. It can't be impossible because that's a pipe dream, right? Like I'm not making the NBA. It's not. It's impossible, right? But what is possible? So is it true that there has to be a level of possible is saying you don't live in the clouds. You have to live on the ground, but that doesn't mean you can't get, pretty far and pretty high into achievement. There has to be an element of reality into the possible. But it's not just your current reality, right?
So first of all, Andy, I do think you could make it in the NBA. There are guys that deliver water to those players all day long, right? So you can. There's a place for you. There's a place.
I'll be on. I tried out, Mike. Okay. Apparently, that's harder than
really good water delivery guys.
Yeah, apparently, it's harder than
the competition's tight. But a little more work. A little more work you can do.
Yeah.
No.
I would tell you, that's a really interesting concept you just brought up, right? Impossible, and that I have a difficult time with impossible because I guess that would be a different number for different people, right? I think we set our own impossible. There are crazy things that people have achieved that honestly were thought to be impossible. And again, the Bannister, 4-minute mile being one of the most commonly known ones, right? If you run a 4-minute mile back in that day, the medical association, everybody thought there's no way in the world you would survive it. Your heart cannot maintain that type of pace without you dying. So running a 4-minute mile will kill you. And then Bannister, of course, does it. And then I don't know the exact number, I apologize, but like 18 others achieved that 4-minute mile within 3 months of him having achieved it, right? It had been a record that could have never been made for centuries. And now all of a sudden it's achieved. So impossible is so tough to figure out. I think that when we realize something's impossible in our goal setting, we aren't going to change anything to achieve it. And therefore it was really never, it was always a pipe dream from day one, right?
Yeah.
So I think that a common, a person who has any type of recognition of their own abilities and possibilities would probably set something that wasn't impossible as a goal. If it's impossible, that's a disappointment, and you're leading to breakdown.
Yeah.
But I would also say, so funny because you were on something, and I was almost going to talk about this too, because you said it's not always about the numbers, or it's not always about this, and it isn't always about the numbers, right? Like, we have gone through periods of time in offices I've worked in where we have removed numbers and discussions about productivity and achievement in the business we didn't talk about those. We talked about the actual other areas of one's life that mattered to them, that they ultimately were running for something big and interesting. And I would much rather have a conversation about that topic, even if it has nothing to do with work. I'll give you a great example. It was people who came to me with goals of saying, I want to be a better tennis player. And I'm like, I would love to be a part of that. Because you know what? I know if you increase your ability in your tennis game, if you start having success there, that's going to bleed into this career. Right, you're going to be better here. I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better dad. Well, what is that going to look like? Right. Well, I'm going to read to my kids every night. I'm going to do this and this and this. I am all for that. I'm all for asking how that's progressing and what you're doing. Why? Because I know if you're excelling there, you will excel here. It all bleeds in. So it's that holistic approach of saying, whatever the goals are, sharing them, whether they're personal, whether they're professional, spiritual, it's all about letting people know what you're up to. And I would tell you that's probably as encouraging as anything. I just made a post, I guess it was Monday, about my daughter who's 30 years old and facing cancer and had her surgery yesterday. Super, super positive output there. I mean, the surgery went exceptionally well. But what has happened over the last month is this young lady, a 30-year-old facing cancer, was posting very authentically and transparently about her experience and her goals and desires and absolutely knowing without question that this would be beat. And her sharing it authentically and transparently, again, not just sharing, but full transparency, opened up doors and conversations with people that was so uplifting. And so, as we think we're running through something, going after something interesting, to keep it to yourself, what a travesty, right? People are so engaged and excited to be along the journey of people who are up to something. And I love those words, right? Up to something. When someone is up to something, you want to be around them. You want to be engaged with them. They bring you up through conversation. How do you become that person, right? I think it's transparency and sharing and putting out things that are audacious and exciting and willing to do what's necessary to actually achieve them. That's really, really, really fun.
Wes?
Mike, I love it. And it makes me think of a couple things on this is that, the eye can only see, the ear can only hear what the brain is looking for. And it is fundamental also to our faiths, which is that, as we think, so we are. And so there is a big difference between ungrounded optimism and grounded optimism, meaning grounded optimism means not only am I going to throw this thing out that's big, it's audacious, it's exciting, it gives you energy to do hard things, but then it causes you to begin to look for and seize those things that'll ultimately lead you to closer to the outcome. Now, we talked about my year this year, and the when I shared with you our objectives and what we're going to do, and with our team the objectives, to the first 6 months of what we call the council year, we had a number, and basically the number I threw out would have been 10 times in the next 6 months what we did in the first 6. And now here's what ended up happening. Long story short is we didn't do 10 times. We missed it. We did 9.5. And so, which was still really cool, right? So everybody's still excited about it. But it is the big difference, because when you're talking about just the probable, like you said, incremental growth, that's just do more of what you're already doing faster. Everybody works harder. When you look at like something that is exponential growth, as we like to say around here, the 10 times growth you have to do things fundamentally different. You throw out a lot of the things that got you where you are because to get where you want to go, they're just expired. There's a shelf life to some of those things. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, again, I love that, right? When you put something out there big, there's goals are kind of two things, right? They're math and their psychology. They involve them both, right? Psychology is a ramification of what the math is going to show you. Math is meaning I'm going to put metrics out. I'm going to do certain things in a shorter incremental period that allow me to know I'm on the path. And that psychology, when you start to see those math things showing up, you're on your pace, that starts to energize you and create more desire, bigger opportunities, more faith, confidence, all that. But you know what? I want to go back to one thing because it's like you said, a lot of times we throw out these goals and they're just either incremental, right? That's going to happen unnaturally, or they're so significant and we're not doing anything about it. I think it's interesting because today, people are putting out goals and then again, not doing what's necessary to hit them. I think this is such a big deal. And again, it's so deflating. And interesting, I want to use the word activity. I want to use activity as a word, right? And again, it encompasses so many things. Whether it's activity in self-growth, activity in actually your job and doing the numbers and working harder. Okay. Again, that's good and bad. Like you mentioned, if you just work harder at the same exact task, it might not allow you to get to where you want to be. Right. But I still want to go back to, I just have been on this topic of I think people have kind of forgot about what, or the true essence of sacrifice. Like sacrifice has almost become a 4-letter word in society today. And it certainly was enhanced by COVID, but we were already moving in this direction of leisure being like our true purpose in life. And so I sit there and I look at saying, gosh, we would be so much more happy if we were doing the activities necessary to make it than we are when we're not. I love a quote. I've used this a ton. My poor people around me hear this all the time, right? I would rather work 8 hours a day than worry for 24. Yeah. I'd rather work 8 hours a day than worry for 24. I like nothing feels better than getting home after a really, really hard day where you are super active and you've got a lot accomplished and you're like, I'm exhausted. Now again, society would be like, you're exhausted. Oh, how poor you. And I'd be like, I feel good. I feel good. Yeah. It's like that whole methodology, like if you're out having to work in your yard and you're having to move 8 tons of rocks and you got to move them from the front yard to the backyard, that couch is so much more comfortable that night.
Yeah.
It's right. So much more comfortable. When I haven't put the effort in, I sit on that couch. It's just a couch. It doesn't even feel that great. Right. Yeah. I can have an impact where things around me actually feel better, taste better, are better because I'm in a space where I'm making them better.
Mike, and I want to hit that, and then I want to jump into one other truth before we wrap up here. This is a perfect segue into it. But you and I had dinner a few weeks back, and one of the things we talked about was some of Arthur Brooks' work. He's a behavioral psychologist, teaches a class at Harvard that has a waiting list on happiness. And one of the things he talks a lot about is the micronutrients of happiness and their enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. With this one, I want to talk about satisfaction because satisfaction is only a product of having to overcome hard things. We cannot have happiness without satisfaction, and you can't have satisfaction without putting something out there, working really hard for it. And then that's what makes the food taste better. That's what makes the couch feel better. That's what makes time with your family, because you have satisfaction. If you cheat to get an A on a test, you may get a good result, but you don't have satisfaction. It's just not part of it. So I love that. The last one I want to hit on before we need to close here for you is you have in here that I think goes beautifully with this, a whole chapter on what is maybe my favorite chapter in the book. Is called, it's the 45th truth. It's called savage persistence. Savage persistence. And to just read the intro here, the amount of power gained from not quitting can be far more inspiring than gains from victories. The power of a finisher is like a tidal wave. It can't be stopped. Winning belongs to those who are unwilling to quit. Let's talk about that one for a little bit.
So it's really interesting you brought that up, right? And it's been a while. I don't know exactly every word, and that's been about a year since I wrote that chapter, right? But I will tell you what's funny about you bringing this up and this whole premise of not quitting. The subject matter of that chapter actually happens to my son, and everything about what he did was about quitting. it was quitting a bad habit, right? It was quitting something that was derailing his life. And it's interesting because I'll tell you the story. My son, was born, at 26 weeks. And this was 26 years ago. 26 weeks today is certainly less dangerous. Back then, he was on oxygen, literally forced oxygen, for, a way longer portion he should have ever been. The doctors all said he'd be blind and deaf. He was in the hospital in intensive care for 69 days.
Wow.
He was none of those things. But what was interesting is when he was born, again, through the trauma of birth, he had a grade 3 frontal lobe brain injury, which is not ideal. Let me just tell you. And crazy conversations with doctors. I had a doctor tell us when he was about 6 months old. This is literally the craziest thing. He said, "Man, I will tell you, if you can just keep this kid out of prison, by the time he's 25, he's gonna have a shot." Now, to tell a parent that, like, we're like, what are you even talking about? What was that?
Your son was 6 months old at the time?
He was 6 months old. If you can keep him out of prison.
That's a weird conversation to have
Interesting.
with a parent of a 6-month-old. Yeah.
Right. Now, where was it stemming from, right? Well, it was a frontal lobe injury. And if you do any type of frontal lobe research, it's incredible. That's where inhibition is really manifested, right? Our ability to manage ourselves. And when that is damaged, in adults, it's transformational when you have a frontal lobe injury. You'll read about it where people will become heavy addicts after any type of significant trauma to their frontal lobe, whether it's gambling or whether it's whatever you want to talk about that ultimately isn't ideal, it's a natural behavior. And so, children or certainly adolescents are already have inhibition issues, right? And they have to grow into them. But again, when injury like this, he just knew, and he was 100% accurate. We had challenges with Tanner from really about, you can see addictive behavior, personalities that were happening with him as or 3 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old. Food, was a very addictive behavior for him early, right? And just other issues. Well, time he was about 14 years old. Again, drugs are enter the scene, and this kid fully partakes, right? I mean, just no ability to say no. And I can fast forward the story, right? He went through a lot of things, and really at 25, which is just miraculous. I can't remember even the doctor who told us this, but at his 25th birthday, within months of it, he made a decision. He was done. I'm done with this life. I'm quitting alcohol. I'm quitting drugs. I'm quitting this.
Wow.
And he actually was able to not be in prison, right? So we actually got that part right? He did not go to prison. That was like, whoa, that was a win. Doctor was kind of right. And to look at this kid now, 2 years later, making that decision, what he did do, where I say this persistence, savage persistency, he has a longing, a desire, like I don't even comprehend, to partake of things that are like drugs or alcohol or things that I just haven't had to experience in life. It's a savage restriction in his life to say, I'm not going there. He is persistent. He is 2 years clean and sober, and he's replaced it. He is still addictive. An addictive person is going to be addictive, but he's moved it into, like, he's in the gym twice a day.
Wow.
He's addicted to working really unhealthy foods. Yes, he cheats on the food. Trust me, mainly when I'm with him, because I'm terrible with food. I love bad food, but literally the lessons I got to watch in this person who had to push through something that was so enveloped in their life and so traumatic, so needed, and to say, I'm going to just not do it, is just the reverse of us, right? That could say, I want to achieve something. I want to be somewhere. I want to go somewhere, and I will do what's necessary. As hard as it would be for me to do, he was reversed. I'm going to stop as hard as it is for me to do. Yeah. And ultimately is in a really, really healthy place. So it's just recognizing, and that goes back to sacrifice, right? Doggone it, we're back on that word. It's sacrificing. When you're wanting to achieve something, what are you going to have to sacrifice to get there? And sacrifice is a beautiful word. It is a beautiful word. It is talking about discipline and desire that manifests itself into something that ultimately it's to the betterment of those in our life and even in our community, especially in our business, right? We get to help so many people when we are better ourselves. So, man, you brought that up. Boy, I could talk about that into
Well, that's a big
eternity,
deal.
but
And congratulations to your son, and continue to eat unhealthy food with him.
yeah.
But that's a blessing. I want to do the parameters around the giveaway, but Wes, or actually, I'll just ask you, Mike. Mike, tell us about the name of your book.
Yeah, the 52 truths. And it's so funny. It says the 52 truths. So let me just say this about it, right? It isn't the only 52 truths. Sometimes when the's out there, it's a little bit of an exclamation point, but I'd already set up the website, so I had to use the word "the" in it. It's 52 really good truths that I think and they're in short increments. They're usually about 3 pages in a book. They're designed to be read once a week with some thought, and every one of them are a different subject matter. So it's really about a year experience to get through it if you did it correctly or as intended. And I just think that the subject matter is really relevant for everybody: personal, business, leadership.
Okay. Well, we want to give away 10 of those. And so here's the parameters of this for those who are listening. We'll put a description of this in the show notes. You have to do 2 things, which is, one, you have to send an email to info@wesyounglive.com. And the subject line is 52 truths, 52 truths. And here's what we need from you. We need to know, what's a truth that you live by? We want you to put some thought into this. What is a truth that you live by? And then send us your mailing address. We're going to send out 10 copies of Mike's book. But again, send an email to info@wesyounglive.com. And the subject line is 52 truths. And then, what is a truth that you live by? And your mailing address. And we'll choose 10 winners and we'll send those out. Wes, I want to give you the last word.
Yeah, Mike, love you, brother. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for the help that you've provided me and all these people that are listening today, as well as the many that your work and the people you've helped to inspire, create every day. So just so happy to have had you, and look forward to having you back.
Man, it was a blast. You two have a blessed day, and I just wish many, many good things for the remainder of this year for you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike. Blessings.